Billy lived in rural Nebraska, and Billy was a little boy. He didn't have a lot of friends, so he would just often play by himself outside his parents' house, which is this really, really beautiful Victorian home. It's about 200 years old, much older than most homes in America, and not a whole lot around it besides some cornfields and some low mountains, and out towards the edges of the property there is this old cave. And Billy would oftentimes go play inside this cave and capture the various, or not capture, just really admire the wildlife of the cave as it would change through the seasons. Sometimes it was bats, sometimes it was bears. These are really friendly bears. Sometimes it was indie musicians hanging out in there, playing music for the acoustics and the romance of being in a cave. You once saw, actually, Conor Oberst from Bright Eyes was in this cave, playing his albums all the way through. But Billy, you never knew he was going to find that cave, and there was a certain time of year where there would be spiders, and this was before the bats came in and ate all the spiders for that season, circle of life and all that. And one day he goes in, and there's just this gigantic spider, and I'm not even talking like tarantula spider big, or, you know, those famous pictures of those spiders in, I believe it's Iraq. It's like bigger spiders than even that. The spider is, I don't know, like 8 feet tall. It's about 2 feet taller than her dad. Its thorax is just robust, and it has these long legs going down. And it's talking to her, but it's talking to her without moving lips. It's like it's telepathically communicating with her. And it has such a nice, oddly kind voice. She didn't really think a spider would have a voice that nice. And the giant 8-foot spider who's telepathically communicating with her what she wants is what?
So Billy is terrified of this spider. Every time that the cave had been filled with spiders, she had originally tried to kill them, run away, would only look at them from a distance. She would give all of the benefit of the doubt to everything else in the cave, even Conor Oberst. But then once spiders would pop up, they just elicited immediate terror, and she would run away. But when this gigantic spider named Shelob telepathically communicated with her, she was frozen in place, and that the fear that she felt evaporated because she was able to communicate with it. And it said, "You think you're scared of me? Think about all of my brothers and sisters that these skyscraper-sized monsters constantly come into their dark, cozy homes, tear down their webs, crush us. We're being terrorized by you. What do you think it's like to be a spider? And you think that we're disgusting." And Billy fights against this, can't understand why she's not allowed to be afraid of these icky, creepy, crawly things. And they start to argue telepathically, and Shelob's mental energy gets bigger and brighter and larger, and then suddenly, like a bright flash in her mind, Billy is overwhelmed and all goes white. And then as it settles down, she realizes what she sees is actually, it's like she can see in a panorama in a bunch of different facets, like in little hexagons. And she realizes she can't smell the bat guano in the cave anymore, but she can feel it so well. She can feel it on all 2, 4, 8 of her arms. And then she sees in the panorama herself, Billy, and realizes
that Shelob has given her the gift of Shelob's own point of view. And what Billy learns is that Shelob and all of Shelob's kin, all the other things that appear to be spiders, they just present as being something that would be scary or could potentially, hurt someone in some way, when in reality, Shelob shows Billy that is just her perception of things, that actually they do so many wonderful things for us. I mean, spiders oftentimes defend us from other pests within our home that might inflict some sort of pain on us, and that she was wrong about that, and that she also learns that Shelob is not actually just a giant insect. Shelob is a non-human intelligence that sees things so differently than we see it, and that every spider that she's ever seen was one with Shelob, that they exist as one peaceful consciousness, and that with that, Shelob got to observe what the world could be, imagine what the world could be if we were all like Shelob and Shelob's brothers and sisters all over the world, defending us from other insects that would do us harm.
And Billy, who was once a lonely child and isolated in Nebraska, now felt what it was like to be simultaneously solitary and surrounded by an enormous community at the same time, and learned that sometimes solitude is okay, and sometimes being in a large group of spiders is okay. And she built her first ever web in order to catch a helicopter, and decided that she liked it so much that she wouldn't go back to being a human. And so Billy, which has Shelob in her body, was disowned by her parents because she started acting like a weird spider and eating flies and not talking and trying to crawl on the walls, but gravity works in different ways. And Shelob got to experience the horrors of being human and being stuck in this human body and in our human civilization, the horrors of loneliness, whereas Billy, now in Shelob's body, got to feast on a helicopter, which is something that every child wants to do. The end.
There once was a little girl, and this little girl found life horribly uninteresting. She would even say boring. She lived in the middle of a city in a small house with her mother and father. Every day she would go to school and learn numbers, dates, history, science projects, but all of them left her flat. None of them seemed, vibrant. In fact, I don't think she even knew the word vibrant. She knew words like beige, and adequate, pop quiz. Then one day her parents said, for the weekend, we're going into the mountains for a vacation at an Airbnb. And she sighed, great, I'll be bored in the mountains instead of bored at home. And she brought along her phone, and she brought along her iPad, and she brought along her music, and sat in the back seat, and the family drove into the mountains. And sure enough, her parents were arguing about directions and squabbling about politics and talking about the news, just like they always did, and she found it all so boring. Now, while she was still in the city, she would check in on her friends and see if there were any new videos there people were talking about, or songs or dances. All of it very much like the last song she had heard, or the same dance that she had seen. All of it the same gossip sort of spiraling around. All of it very, very boring. For a while, she counted the buildings as she passed, all of them gray, all of them with windows, some 7 stories, some 8, some 4, all of them rather boring numbers. And finally, she got to the bridge where the city ended and the countryside began, and she noticed there were no buildings as she left the city, and she found that was slightly more interesting. In fact, as she got a little further on, she found that the iPad and phone started losing range, and now she thought, well, I'm really gonna be bored. I can't even look at TikTok anymore. And then the woods got a little thicker, and the road started steeping upwards, and she leaned back in her chair because moving up at such a steep rate. And she found that she was looking at the tips of trees as the car approached them. And the tips of trees sort of seemed to spike the sky, seemed to catch the clouds, seemed to kind of play with the sunlight. And she thought, that's something other than boring, I suppose. And she drifted off just enough, sort of dreaming about treetops and clouds and sunlight. And when she woke up, it was sunset. And the family was pulling up in front of a wooden cabin surrounded by nothing but other trees. And her mother and father were moving in the groceries and carrying in the bags. And even they were a little quieter, not arguing about who was to make dinner or squabbling about the latest political results. They seemed quiet as well. And the little girl looked around and wondered, well, where are the other people? Where are the buildings? What is this Airbnb? And her parents said, we found it on a particular site. We don't even know exactly how it came to us, but it's a very good bargain. We think we should be very, very happy. And the night was being made, and the mother was making a stew, and the father was getting the fire running. And the little girl said, I'm going to explore upstairs. And she went up the stairs of the house. It was creaky Every step made a noise. Now, at home in the city, the steps had been so clean and so quiet that she could creep around without making a noise. But here, it's like the house was talking back to her. Every step she made. She was about to step to the very top stair when her mother called Celia, and she ran back down for dinner. Celia was curious. She couldn't wait to go back upstairs and find out what was making all the noise. Why was the house so alive with creaks? So when her parents finished the dinner, they set to work on a game of Monopoly by the fire and asked if she wanted to join. And she said, I'm a little tired of this. Gosh, it's not that late, but I think I'm just going to go to bed. And that's what she did. But Celia wasn't tired at all. She wanted to explore the rest of the upstairs of this house. So she went back up the steps. Celia. She stopped. Did she hear the creaking of the house saying her name? No, surely not. It's just an old house. Celia. But now she was near the top. And now she looked back down, and she could see the flames or the warmth color coming from the living room where her parents were playing a game of Monopoly. And it was warm and bright and orange below, and above her was dark. No light of the day left, not even moonlight. Which way would she go? Now, of course, boring Celia would have gone back down to a game of Monopoly, knowing that, like always, her dad would think he was winning, but her mom would eventually win and have all the different money stored up in her corner. But Celia didn't want to be boring. And it only occurred to her now, for the very first time, that maybe the world wasn't so boring. Maybe she was boring. And she didn't want that, so she stepped up. And now she was on the top floor of this house. And she could feel and see different hallways, but there was such darkness that she couldn't quite find out which direction to go. She walked down one hallway, feeling her way along the wall, until there was a turn down another. She went down there, and then there was another turn and went down there. And finally, seemingly much further than she ever imagined this house to be, she found a door. And when she tried to open it, she opened it just an inch. And then another inch. The door seemed to creak her very name. Would she walk in? Would she enter into a darkness that somehow was even darker than the darkness she was already in? Well, boring Celia never would. Celia didn't want to be boring. So she stepped into the darkness. She went further and further in. When she touched the walls, they were no longer the worn wood of the house that she had been in before. Now they were cold stone, almost like a castle walls she imagined, and some of them seemed cold to the point of dampness. She walked further on, step after step after step, for what seemed like an hour, deeper and deeper into a darkness, and when she looked back, she couldn't even see the shadow of the door in which she had entered. At some point, she called out, "Hello?" And all she heard was the echo of the voice. Echo. "It's me! It's me! It's me! It's me! Celia! Celia! Celia!" She thought, maybe I've gone too far. Maybe it is time to be a little bit boring. That would be okay. And she turned back around, but when she did, she found that the door that had been so far away was now immediately behind her. And it was closed. She reached for the handle and tried to push. She tried to pull. She tried everything, but it wouldn't budge. She slammed on it. "Mom! Dad!" She could feel all her screams being absorbed by the stones around her, soaked up by the wood of the door. Celia. Now this wasn't a creak. This wasn't an echo. This was a voice, and it was coming from somewhere far, far, far behind her. Now she couldn't go back, but she thought maybe there's another hallway. Maybe there's a window. Maybe she could find a telephone or something, some way out. So she knew that her one way to escape whatever situation she was in was to walk deeper into the darkness. And she stepped in further and further. But there were no hallways. There were no turnings. There was just step after step after step. To finally, ahead of her, she saw the slightest flicker of red flame. She thought, oh my God, I've made it back to my parents. I've made it back to the living room. They're probably playing Monopoly now. Maybe I can still join in the game. And she started running. Even in the darkness, her feet slapping against the cold stone floors. Mom, Dad, she called out until she got to the flame. But it was not the living room she remembered. There was the living room. There was the fireplace. There was the game of Monopoly. But all the pieces were covered with dust and cobwebs, as if they'd been there for 100 years. The furniture itself was moldy and falling apart, and crunched over the Monopoly game as if in mid-game, as if still counting the money before them were her mother and father in the form of skeletons. She took a step closer. Mom, Dad, and there on the mantel, above the fireplace, was a cold, ivory-colored skull. Looked down at her with its non-eyes, into her soul, into her mind, into all of her life, and said, Celia, Celia. Now, boring Celia might have screamed. Boring Celia might have given in. But this was a new Celia. This was the Celia who'd been brave enough to climb the stairs. This had been Celia who'd been brave enough to step into the darkness. This had been the Celia who was brave enough to go inside a door, to work and explore and wonder. This was a Celia who was not going to allow for this. And she yelled with every bit of oxygen and life in her lungs, I want my parents back, and ran to the windows and threw open the thick curtains, and in flooded light, morning light, was already the next day, and as the light filled the room, she saw the skeletons of her parents, boom, become fully themselves again. She saw the dust float away. She saw the game of Monopoly come back to its true form, and she saw the skull become the empty rock that it was. And she turned to her parents, who were yawning. We must have fallen asleep in front of the fire, Celia. How about some breakfast? And she said, I think that's a great idea. I know a pancake place back in the city. Let's go. The end.
Once upon a time, there was a little boy named Joseph. And Joseph didn't like to laugh. Laughing was something that he was so afraid to do, because when Joseph laughed, he would let out a little snort, kind of like a pig. So no matter what anybody said, no matter how funny it was, Joseph would hold his face very stern. It would look as if nothing was funny. You could have the funniest cartoon, the funniest joke, the funniest noise in the whole world, and Joseph would bite down on his lower lip and he would hold his face stern because he didn't want to laugh. Because when Joseph was in kindergarten, a girl in class was running outside and slipped and fell in the mud. And everybody laughed at her, and Joseph was laughing. But when he started laughing, his laugh went, and then suddenly, everyone in class turned around, and it didn't matter that this little girl was covered in mud. No one cared about that anymore, because now we had Joseph the pig boy, and nobody wanted to be his friend anymore. So from that day on, Joseph decided, I'm not laughing at anything. One day, Joseph arrives at school, and he sits in the back seat of the class like he normally does. And everyone in class kind of ignored Joseph at this point. They were, let's say, a little scared of him. He's the kid that never laughs. There's gotta be something weird. Little did they know that Joseph didn't laugh because they made fun of him. Everybody seems to forget the things that they make fun of people for in kindergarten, especially when you're in third grade. That's like a whole lifetime ago. So Joseph sat there in the back of the class, and the teacher comes in and says, "Great news, everyone. We're going on a field trip today." And Joseph just sat there, stern-faced, as all of his classmates cheered. They were so excited. Joseph wasn't excited. He didn't let anyone know when he was excited. And the teacher said, "Today, we are going to the circus." And suddenly, as if time had stopped, Joseph took a deep breath and he gulped. "The circus," he thought. "There's going to be acrobats, and that'll be cool. There's going to be lions, and that'll be a little scary. But oh no, there's going to be clowns at the circus." And Joseph wasn't afraid of clowns because he thought they were scary. Joseph was afraid of clowns because he thought they were funny. And if he thought they were funny, he was gonna laugh. And if he was gonna laugh, then he was gonna snort. And if his class heard him snort, then they were all gonna make fun of him. And then they're all gonna think he was weird again. Oh no, this is not good for Joseph. So he decided, I gotta get out of this somehow. So the first thing he did is he decided, I'm gonna fake sick. He raises his hand and he calls on his teacher and he goes, Miss Smith, I can't go to the circus today. I'm sick. And she looks at him. She goes, Joseph, you're not sick. You're just in a bad mood. You're going to the circus today. And he sits there and goes, okay, well, that didn't work. So what else can I do? I know, I'll get in trouble. If I get in trouble, then they're certainly not going to let me go on this field trip. So he sits there and he goes, I'm going to knock my desk over. So in the middle of the lesson, he just grabs his desk and he tilts it over and he spills out all of his papers and all of his books, and it makes a loud sound and it scares the whole room. And he looks at his teacher and goes, well, Miss Smith, I sure made a big commotion in here. I guess I can't go to the circus today. She goes, Joseph, you're going to the circus. Now please, put your desk back together because we have to go. Joseph pouted. He thought to himself, oh, I guess I'm gonna have to go. He lines up with the rest of his class and they're all excited. They're jumping up and down. They're all talking about how much popcorn they're gonna eat. They're all thinking about what's the most exciting thing that they're going to see, and they all go on the bus. And they go on the bus, and Joseph, he sits by himself, and he pouts, and he stews, and he thinks, what if, when I get there, I just close my eyes the whole time? I don't even see what's happening. I don't even see what's funny. That way, I definitely won't laugh. The school bus arrives at the circus, and they all march out of the bus, and they're walking around the gravel, and all of their shoes are crunching all of the rocks as they head towards the big top. And they go in the big top, and there's an MC in the center of the ring, and he's got a big top hat, and he's welcoming everybody in, and he's got a big voice, and he's very exciting, and everyone in the room is so excited to see him, except for Joseph. And the ringmaster notices this, and he looks at Joseph, and he goes, what's wrong, kid? Aren't you having fun? And he goes, I don't have fun. And they go, oh, I see. We have a kid here who doesn't have fun. And so the ringmaster thinks to himself, that's my mission today. We're gonna make sure that this kid has fun. So while all of the kids take their seat and they get excited, the ringmaster runs backstage behind the curtain where all of the circus folk are, and he tells the clown specifically, there's a boy, you can't miss him. He's got a very grumpy face. Our goal today should be to make that kid smile. I think we can do it. So the circus begins. The acrobats come out and they flip and they're tossing and they're doing the coolest stunts you've ever seen. Everyone in Joseph's class is cheering. And then you have the lion tamer come out, and everyone is a little nervous because this is dangerous stuff. But the lion tamer knows exactly what he's doing, and the lion is roaring but listening. And everybody feels safe. But then the clown comes out, and Joseph, he feels his heart racing. Oh no, the clown, he's gonna make me laugh. Everyone is gonna hear me snort, and I'm not gonna have any friends anymore. And so he sits and he waits, and the clown is doing tricks, he's doing magic, he's telling jokes. Everyone is laughing, and Joseph is biting harder and harder into his lip. I'm not gonna laugh. I'm not gonna laugh. And then suddenly, the clown comes running towards Joseph, running as fast as he possibly can. And right before he gets to Joseph, boom! He gets a pie in the face. And Joseph can't help it. It's the funniest thing he's seen in a long, long time. And he starts laughing and laughing and laughing. And wouldn't you know it, he's laughing. Loud snort. And the kids all start laughing at him. And he's so upset, and he wants to be angry, and he wants to just disappear because this is the most embarrassed he has been since kindergarten. But then the clown starts laughing with him, and the clown also starts to snort laugh. And Joseph looks at him and he goes, "You snort laugh too?" And the clown says, "Of course I snort laugh. Anybody who's having a good time has to snort laugh." So Joseph and the clown are laughing and snorting and laughing and snorting, and the rest of the kids, they want to get in on the fun too. So now suddenly the entire class is laughing and snorting and laughing and snorting and having the time of their lives. And one of the kids looks at Joseph and goes, "Joseph, you're a really funny kid. How come you've never let us know how funny you are?" And Joseph says, "Well, because I snort laughed in kindergarten and everybody made fun of me." And then when we weren't making fun of you, Joseph, we were laughing because we thought you were so funny. And Joseph thought to himself, well, I guess I've spent the last 3 years being scared of something that I didn't have to be afraid of. And so they enjoyed the rest of the circus, and they got back on the bus to go back to class, and Joseph sat next to a new friend, and he thought to himself, I guess sometimes the best way to handle being scared is to just laugh it off. The end.
Once upon a time, there was a little girl named Mandy. And Mandy lived in a normal house, in a normal suburbs, in a normal town. And Mandy thought that she had a completely normal life. But in her closet, in the very, very back, there was this tiny, tiny little door. Mandy asked her parents every couple of days, "Where does the tiny little door go?" And her parents always told her, "Oh, it just leads under the house. It's just there in case the pipes burst, in case we ever need to get under the house. It's just a hatch to get under the house." And it was sealed up, so Mandy couldn't open it. And so she forgot about it, and she just lived her life and played with her toys. And then one night she's laying in bed, and all of a sudden she hears a knocking. Knock, knock, knock. And Mandy gets up. She's like, "Where's that coming from? Is it my door?" And she opens her door, and the house is pitch black. Mom and Dad are asleep, and she's all by herself. And so she goes and she gets back into bed. And then she hears it again. Knock, knock, knock. And she gets up, and she looks all around, and is it coming from under my bed? And she looks, and there's nothing under her bed, and she checks her windows. And then she realizes it's coming from the closet. And she opens up her closet, which is the scariest thing ever at night if you're a kid. But she slowly opens the closet, and the closet is empty. It's just her shoes and her board games and her toys and her clothes. But she hears it coming from the back. Knock, knock, knock. And she feels like that's where it's coming from. The back of her closet. Specifically, it's coming from the little door. There's something knocking on the other side of the little door. And Mandy slams the door and gets back into bed and pulls the covers up over her head, and she tries to forget about it, and eventually she goes to sleep. But then the next night, it happens again. Mandy's in bed, and she tries telling her parents about it, and her parents are like, "It's just to underneath the house. There's nothing there. There's nothing that would knock. It's your imagination." And her parents turn off the lights and leave. And the next night, she tries to fall asleep, but as soon as her parents are in bed, Mandy starts hearing it again. And she gets up, and she creeps over, and she opens the closet door again, and the closet's completely normal. But coming from that tiny door on the other side of her closet, she hears knock, knock, knock. And so she doesn't know what to do, and she leans closer to it and presses her ear up to it, and she says, "Hello?" And a voice echoes back, "Hello?" And Mandy says, "Who are you?" And the voice says, "I'm trapped in here. You've got to let me out." And Mandy says, "Why don't you just crawl out?" And the voice says, "I can't. This door doesn't lead to the underside of your house. It leads to another dimension, and I'm trapped in here. I need you to let me out. And Mandy says, but who are you? And the voice says, I'm just a kid like you. I'm trapped. And Mandy is really scared. She doesn't know what to do. And so she crawls back into bed and pulls the covers up over her head and she falls asleep. And then the next night, she tries to tell her parents again, and she says, there's a kid trapped in my closet on the other side of the wall, and it's another dimension. And her parents say, you are having some wild dreams. And they put her to bed again. And Mandy gets up in the middle of the night because once again, she is hearing knock, knock, knock. And she goes to her closet again, and it's just a normal closet, but there on the other side is that door and that hatch. And she hears the knocking again. And she starts talking to the voice again and says, why are you in there? And the voice says, I'm trapped. A witch has trapped me in here. And she says, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. And she starts trying to open up the door, but her parents have sealed it shut. And she starts pulling with all of her might, and the voice is pleading with her that there's a witch. And she tries and she pulls at it and she doesn't know what to do. And so she goes back to bed, and the voice keeps saying, please, you have to help me. And so the next day, she hears it again at night. And again, she's tried to tell her parents, but her parents don't believe her. But tonight, she has a plan. She has a plan. She's got rulers. She's got all different types of toys from her room, and she is going to find a way to pry that door open. And so she waits to hear the knocking, and she waits, and her parents go to sleep, and it's forever, and she's just sitting there in darkness, and she's scared to death, and she's waiting to hear the knocking so she can help the kid on the other side of the wall. And suddenly, she hears it again. Knock, knock, knock. And so she gets up, and she creeps over to the closet, and she hears it again. Knock, knock, knock. And she calls out, hello, are you there? And she hears a voice answer back, yes, I'm here, but the witch is close. You've got to hurry. And Mandy jumps into it, and she starts trying to get that little door open, and she doesn't know what to do. And suddenly she does, and she opens it up, and she looks inside, and it's just darkness. She can't see anything, and she leans her head in slowly. Hello? And then suddenly she sees another little girl come barreling through running, and the little girl says, close it up quick, there's a witch on the other side. And Mandy doesn't know what to do, and then all of a sudden this witch hand shoots through the door and grabs her leg, and Mandy doesn't know what to do, so she shoves the door closed, and then she starts piling books up in front of the door, in front of the door, in front of the door, and she piles the books up and closes it as fast as she can, and on the other side she hears the witch howling that she can't get through. But Mandy has saved the little girl. And the little girl says that she actually lives in that town and that she was captured by the witch because she went through the door in her own closet. And so Mandy decides that she needs to seal up the closet, and the little girl goes home to do the same. The end.
Once upon a time, there was a little boy. And that little boy loved to ride his bike, and he loved to go out and explore. He especially loved exploring the nearby woods near his house, where he had all sorts of wonderful adventures. There was all these great hills and dense trees, and he would go in, and certain parts of it were so densely packed with trees that it was nice and dark and created all the backdrop for all of his great daydreams. He would go in there and he'd play. It was full of perfect sticks that would represent anything from magical staves to guns to things that he could build into forts. He could do everything that he ever wanted in this forest, and he loved it. But his parents would never, ever let him go out after sunset. Because after sunset, they said, the wolves come out, and that they would hear howling out in the woods. And so they'd never let him out. And one night, he grew so bored in his house. He didn't like playing video games. He didn't like watching television. He liked playing in his imagination in the woods. And that night he was so bored, he decided to sneak out and go investigate the woods. And so he secretly took his bike and he biked away very quietly off down the street and off past the road closed sign at the end of the dead end that led into the woods where he would explore. And he went in and he found it even darker than he'd ever seen it before. and it was so dark. Could barely see, but he knew his way because he had played here so often. He knew every path. He knew every crook. He knew every critter that lived in the woods. He had names for them all. They didn't talk to him, but he talked to them. And as he would go through in the woods, he found himself starting to get a little scared and a little worried because he knew these woods so well, but he started to realize maybe Mom and Dad were right. Maybe I shouldn't be out here. They keep hearing wolves here at night. And he wandered deeper and deeper and started to have second thoughts. Should I be out here at all? Maybe I should have listened to Mom and Dad. And he hears creaks as the wind blows through the boughs, and he hears the breaking of twigs and branches as the nighttime nocturnal animals come out to scurry. And he doesn't know these animals. He doesn't know them by name. He's never seen them before. But they rustle leaves, they break twigs, and he's starting to get very nervous. And he decides to go to this clearing that he knows of, where there's no trees overhead. And it's just this nice open round area where he can go and be in a little light. And as he steps into the clearing, he looks up. And the next thing he knows, he wakes up in bed. And it's the next morning. He's just been gone. He remembered being in the woods. He remembered stepping into the brightly lit clearing. But he doesn't know why. He's here at home. And he goes outside and checks for his bike, and his bike's still there. And he thinks maybe this was a dream. Maybe he dreamed going out into the woods that night. So the next night, he goes out and he sneaks out and he does it again. And he goes to the woods and he used to find this clearing. And he steps into the clearing and nothing happens. He doesn't end up back in bed. He's just in the clearing. He looks up and the moon is bright but not quite full. And then he starts to wonder, wait a second. The moon is not full. The moon was full last night. Am I the wolf? Am I the werewolf? He doesn't know. And he starts to wonder. And so every day from then on, he starts to wonder, is he the werewolf? And so he waits and he starts counting the days and the phases of the moon. And he just starts tracking it along the calendar. And the day of the full moon, he grows very excited and scared because what if he's the werewolf? And so that night, he sneaks out and he looks up, but the sky is full of clouds. He can't see the moon, so he doesn't know. And he's like, well, he's going to go out and he's going to go back into those woods again. And he goes out, he bikes out into the woods and he goes through the dark forest, and he's not so scared anymore because he starts to wonder if he's what he should be scared of. Should he be scared of himself if he's the werewolf? And as he's walking through, he sees small shafts of light coming through the trees because the clouds have clearly burned off. And he goes towards the clearing and he sees it's brightly lit with moonlight. And he steps in and he begins to howl. And then he wakes up the next morning in his bed and he realizes what's really going on. He's the werewolf, but he's concerned because he knows that werewolves are dangerous. That werewolves, they're scary. They kill people. They hurt people. So instantly he does what he normally doesn't do. He goes out to breakfast with his father and he grabs the newspaper and starts reading the newspaper. And his dad looks at him a little strangely because, his son never comes out and reads the newspaper. But he's reading the newspaper and he's going through and he's looking for any horrible things that happened. But nothing horrible happened. So what did he do last night? What happened after he hit the moonlight? And so he's very, very concerned, but wondering, what am I doing? What is going on? So once again, he starts counting the phases of the moon and counting down the days to 28 days later when the moon is going to be full one more time. But this time, he borrows his father's video camera and he takes the video camera out with him. And he takes the camera out and he sets it up near the clearing and he waits. And he waits for the moon to come out from behind the clouds. And as the clearing brightens, he realizes it's his time. And he steps out into the moonlight. And he begins to howl. fur comes out of his arms and his legs and his cheeks. And he gets whiskers, and he grows a big, long snout. And he... And then he wakes up the next morning in his bed. And once again, his bike is back where it should be, and the video camera is back where it belongs. And he waits for his mom and dad to go to work, and then he goes and he takes the video camera and he plugs it into the television, and he just watches. And he sees himself walk slowly into the moonlight. He watches himself transform and change into this big, large, hairy werewolf. And then he gets down on all fours and he howls. And then out of the corner of the screen, he sees 4 other wolves traipse in and howl back at him. And the 5 of them begin playing and enjoying the night and dancing in the moonlight together and having a great time. And they run off into the woods and they go off to gallivant in the woods together. And the video keeps recording, and he fast forward and he fast forward, and then he comes back, and then he starts to see as the moon gets covered up by the clouds, and he turns back into a little boy, and the 4 other wolves turn into other little boys and girls, and they all grab their things and go back home, to go back into bed, to wait to play for 28 more days. The end.